The night was still and cold, with only the occasional truck rumbling down the empty highway. Officer Marcus Johnson had been patrolling this stretch of road for 8 years, and he knew every curve, every exit, every spot where drivers like to speed when they thought no one was watching. Tonight felt different, though. There was something in the air, a tension he couldn't quite place. The radio crackled with routine calls from other units, but his sector remained quiet. Too quiet. That's when he saw the sedan. It was moving fast, much faster than the posted speed limit. The car weaved slightly between the lanes, not the careful weaving of someone trying to avoid detection, but the desperate, erratic movement of someone who had lost all concern for traffic laws. Marcus flipped on his lights and hit the siren. The red and blue beams cut through the darkness like a knife, reflecting off the asphalt and the metal barriers that lined the highway. He expected the usual routine. The driver would slow down, maybe try to make one last desperate sprint to the next exit before finally giving up and pulling over. Instead, the sedan immediately began to slow and move toward the shoulder. No resistance, no attempt to flee. That was unusual. In his experience, people who drove like that usually had something to hide. Marcus pulled his cruiser behind the sedan, leaving enough space for safety, but close enough to maintain control of the situation. He radioed in the stop, giving dispatch the license plate number and his location. Standard procedure. Everything by the book. But as he stepped out of his car, something made him pause. Through the rear window of the sedan, he could see movement. Someone was in the back seat. And there was something about the way the driver was sitting, slumped forward, shoulders shaking. That told him this wasn't going to be a routine traffic stop. He approached the driver's side window, his hand instinctively moving to his belt where his radio was clipped. Not for his weapon. Something told him this wasn't that kind of situation, but for his radio, ready to call for backup if needed. The window was already down. Inside, a young woman sat gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. Tears streamed down her face, and when she looked up at him, her eyes were filled with a terror he had seen before, but never in a traffic stop. "Please," she screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I have to go. He's not breathing." She pointed frantically toward the back seat, and that's when Marcus saw him. A baby boy, maybe a year old, was slumped in his car seat. His skin was pale, almost gray in the dim light from the street lamps. His little chest wasn't moving. His eyes were closed, and his head lolled to one side in a way that made Marcus's stomach drop. All his training kicked in at once. 8 years of police work, countless emergency situations, and his own experience as a father of 2. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for identification. He didn't reach for his ticket book or start the usual questions about why she was speeding. Instead, he yanked open the passenger door. As they pulled into the emergency room entrance, Marcus could see the medical team already waiting outside. 3 doctors and 2 nurses, along with a gurney and what looked like pediatric emergency equipment. He threw the car into park and jumped out, running to the back door. The car seat was designed for safety, not speed, and it took precious seconds to get Tyler out. The baby was still unresponsive, his little body limp and frighteningly still. "We've got an infant, 13 months old, unresponsive, not breathing," Marcus shouted as he handed Tyler to the first doctor who reached him. The medical team immediately surrounded the baby, checking his pulse, his breathing, his pupils. They were moving fast, but with the calm efficiency that comes from years of training and experience. Within seconds, they had Tyler on the gurney and were rushing him inside. The mother tried to follow, but one of the nurses gently stopped her. "Ma'am, you need to let us work. We'll take good care of him, but we need space to do our job." She collapsed to her knees right there in the parking lot, her whole body shaking with sobs. Marcus knelt beside her, not sure what to say, but knowing he couldn't just leave her there. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Martinez. Is he going to be okay?" Marcus wished he could give her a definitive answer, but he had learned over the years that false hope could be crueler than honest uncertainty. "The doctors here are very good," he said instead. "They know what they're doing." They sat there in the parking lot for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Other cars came and went. Other emergencies were handled. But for Marcus and Sarah, time seemed to have stopped. The only sound was her quiet crying and the distant hum of the hospital's emergency generators. Finally, Marcus helped Sarah to her feet. "Let's go inside," he said. "We can wait in the family room, and they'll come find us as soon as they know something." The family waiting room was small and sterile, with uncomfortable chairs and magazines that were months out of date. Sarah sat on the edge of one of the chairs, unable to relax, her eyes fixed on the door that led to the emergency room. Marcus sat across from her, still in his uniform, still technically on duty. He should have called his sergeant to report the situation, should have filled out paperwork about the traffic stop that had turned into a medical emergency. But none of that seemed important right now. "Tell me about Tyler," he said, partly to distract her, and partly because he genuinely wanted to know about the little boy whose life he had just helped try to save. Sarah's face lit up slightly, even through her tears. He's everything to me. His father left when Tyler was 2 months old, so it's just been the two of us. He's such a happy baby, always smiling, always laughing. He loves music. Whenever I play music, he claps his hands and tries to dance." She paused, her voice catching. "He was fine this morning. Perfect. We went to see my mother, and he played with his toys, ate his lunch, took his nap. Then, around dinner time, he just stopped breathing. No warning, no signs that anything was wrong. 1 minute he was babbling at his toys, and the next minute She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus had seen this before, though thankfully not often. Sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS, was every parent's worst nightmare. But he had also seen babies who had simply choked on something, or had allergic reactions, or had fevers that caused seizures. Until the doctors finished their examination, there was no way to know what had happened to Tyler. "You did everything right," Marcus told her. "You got him here as fast as you could. That's what mattered." They waited in silence for a while. The only sound the ticking of a clock on the wall and the distant sounds of the hospital around them. Nurses walked by occasionally, and each time Sarah looked up, hopefully, only to be disappointed when they continued past the waiting room. Marcus found himself thinking about his own children, safe at home with their mother. His daughter, Emma, was 8 now, and his son, Jake, was 5. He couldn't imagine what Sarah was going through. Couldn't imagine the terror of watching your child stop breathing and not knowing if you would ever see them smile again. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor appeared in the doorway. She was young, probably in her early 30s, with kind eyes and the calm demeanor that came from years of delivering both good and bad news to worried families. "Miss Martinez," she said, and Sarah jumped to her feet so quickly she nearly fell over. "Yes, that's me. How is he? Is Tyler okay?" The doctor smiled, and Marcus felt his own shoulders relax for the first time in hours. "He's stable," she said. "He's breathing on his own, and his vital signs are good. We're not entirely sure what happened, but we think he may have had a febrile seizure, a seizure caused by a rapid spike in body temperature. It's scary when it happens, but it's not usually dangerous." Sarah started crying again, but this time they were tears of relief. "Can I see him?" "Of course. He's awake now, and he's been asking for Mama." Marcus stood up as Sarah rushed toward the door, then paused and turned back to him. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not giving me a ticket. Thank you for driving. Thank you for staying with me. I don't know what I would have done without you." Marcus nodded, not trusting his own voice. "Take care of that little boy," he said, finally. He watched her disappear down the hallway toward the pediatric ward, then walked back outside to his cruiser. The night air felt cold against his face, and he realized he was exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last few hours was finally wearing off, leaving him feeling drained and emotionally raw. He sat in his car for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. In 8 years of police work, he had delivered babies, performed CPR, chased down criminals, and dealt with every kind of emergency imaginable. But somehow, this felt different. Maybe it was because he was a father himself, or maybe it was because he had seen the raw terror in Sarah's eyes and had been able to help. His radio crackled, and dispatch was asking for his location. He grabbed the microphone and reported that he was back in service, available for calls. The night was still young, and there were still miles of highway to patrol. But as he drove away from the hospital, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Tyler. He hoped the little boy would grow up healthy and happy, hoped he would never remember this night or the terror his mother had experienced. He hoped that someday, when Tyler was old enough to understand, Sarah would tell him about the night a police officer helped save his life. The highway stretched out ahead of him, dark and empty under the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, other people were having their own emergencies, their own crises, their own moments of terror and relief. Marcus drove on, ready to help whoever needed it, carrying with him the memory of a little boy named Tyler who had reminded him why he became a police officer in the first place. In the distance, he could see the lights of the city twinkling like fallen stars, each one representing a life, a story, a family. And somewhere in that city, a mother was holding her baby boy, grateful for the kindness of a stranger who had chosen to help instead of punish, who had chosen compassion over procedure. Marcus smiled as he drove into the night, ready for whatever came next.